Welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we are taking a look at the OAMP by 29 Pedals. I swear, I'm like 90% sure it's pronounced WAMP, like W-O-A-M-P. I have the manual here, and it says it's pronounced W-A-M-P. So OAMP, OAMP, so WAMP. Look, we're gonna mispronounce it a bunch in this video, I swear we will. Even though I've heard it said out loud by people who know how it's pronounced, I've just lost the plot already. It's so, whatever, don't worry about it. Okay, first things first, and we just have to get this out of the way. Look, I've got a reference monitor so I can make sure that we're not getting all that glare. Look at this color. This is my favorite color that any pedal has ever come in. The very first thing I did when I got this was I sent a picture over to 29 Pedals and basically went, are you kidding me? This is awesome. So this is not part of the sound quality portion of the review. This is the aesthetic review that we're going to do for 8 seconds where we just talk about how freaking great this shade of like soft pink is. It's amazing. I love it. It's freaking beautiful. Okay, let's talk about the sounds. So what is the WAMP? I feel like this is a difficult thing to explain because the number of questions that I have gotten over the months that I have had 29 Pedals' other release, the Una, it is always difficult to explain it because at its core, what the Una is a buffer, and people kind of scoff and kind of tilt their head at like a $200+ buffer. And then you have to explain, one, it's the best buffer you'll ever hear, and there's an effects loop in it for things that don't play nice with buffers. And finally, the 3 little switches on it are magic and like the key to great starting baseline clean tone. This is not a video about that pedal, but I just need I need to set a primer because I have dealt with that with the Una a lot, and I feel like I'm going to deal with it a little bit with this guy. Anyway, so let's get back to it. What is the WAMP? It is an output driver for the end of your signal chain. And if you're like me, you had a lot of trouble wrapping your head around exactly what that means. It's kind of meant to replace like an end of chain buffer or like an end of chain boost or drive or something, which is not something that ever occurred to me to have. If you've been around this channel for any amount of time, I say that in like every video these days, but hopefully you have been. If you're familiar with any of my work, you'll know that there is a massive emphasis on clean delay and reverb sounds. There's a very intense love and kind of protection around here over making sure that my reverb trails and all of the kind of ambiance that I'm taking so much care to craft in a stereo field gets preserved in meaningful ways, that I'm not crushing the headroom, that I'm not kind of like annihilating it and making it sound thin and flat and flabby in those ways that like, say, a low output or a low headroom amp can often kind of create. But this thing had my attention because of how much I loved the Una, and I didn't quite get the idea here was that there'd be a gain structure component. I thought it would just be Una, but at the end, and in a lot of ways it is on kind of fundamental level. You have a couple of switches, you also have a couple of knobs, and you've still got that full normal non-buffered send and return for if you have something at the end of your chain that doesn't play well with buffers, once again. But what this thing actually does is really interesting and multifaceted. It is an end of chain boost, drive, output enhancer kind of thing, but it doesn't just add dirt and flatten out things in the way that you would like get if you put a couple of drive pedals at the end of your chain. You have a presence control and a level control, as well as your input and your output switches. First things first, and I think this is kind of the key starting place for this pedal, is your input and your output switches. The I stands for your input gain stage, and that can be set for a high input gain, low input gain, or a bright switch. And the bright switch essentially is the same input gain as your low setting, but it adds treble to it. So a little bit more brilliance without adding a lot of breakup, which is really helpful, like I said, for talking about preserving that clean reverb trail and everything. And then conversely, you have your output gain settings, and you've got a low, a high, and a dark. And And the dark setting on that cuts top end from the high output gain. So you can actually add a lot of grit from the pedal itself without adding a lot of harshness, which can be really, really valuable. Say if you're going into like a direct in ampless environment, you could kind of do a direct into console style thing with this pedal, which is kind of awesome. In between those two switches, you have your presence and your level. This presence control is kind of a very gentle EQ curve, and as you dial it back, it kind of goes to this saggy mid-scoopy thing that feels very amp-like. And then your level is basically your volume between your two stages. So as you turn that up, especially going into your high or your dark settings, you will get a lot more kind of self-contained grit out of this pedal. So if you're looking to kind of add a little bit more bite after your delays and reverbs without having to push your amp a lot harder necessarily, this can actually accomplish that in a way that preserves a lot of really wonderful headroom. On the intro song, I actually set high input and dark high output on both of my OAMPs with the two Jaguar guitar parts to add a little bit of that kind of like compressed grit after my reverbs. I just wanted something with a little bit of edge to it to kind of accentuate what a wide variety of sounds this can do, especially compared to what I was using it for with my Mustang, which is essentially super clean, presence enhancing, volume enhancing. I want something where I'm not hitting my delays and reverbs harder, but I want something where I'm taking everything that was built up with those really wonderful low output pickups in my Mustang and elevating it as it pushes into the amp without having to compress things or drive things really hard on the front end. And I gotta say, one of the really cool things about this was that 29 Pedals was kind enough to send me 2 of these so that I could run them in parallel at the end of my signal chain. As you know from being around here for any amount of time, I do almost everything in stereo. I do very little in mono on this channel. And so to kind of do a video on something like this in a mono-only environment feels like I would be explaining something that I myself wouldn't really get a lot of use out of. And I don't ever want that to be the case on this channel. I only really want to talk about things that I find a lot of practical, repeated value in. Things that I keep in the studio that I can reach for frequently, even if they don't make it into videos, but like for writing and studios and session stuff and everything else. And I gotta say, much like the Una being at the start of my chain, these things at the end of my chain are one of those, like, it's very emblematic of the name of the channel, Secret Weapons. This is the kind of thing where I should say, I've been using these for like a month over on my Instagram channel and just not showcasing them. And I think that my guitars have been sounding a lot better. And if that's not secret weapons in a very literal sense, I don't know what is. These things are like kind of everything from 29 Pedals so far. The Una and the OAMPs are all these kind of like sleeper tone secrets. Like the Una is just so high value for starting your tone off right at the beginning of your signal chain, in the same way that these are like sliding into home in a very meaningful way. So yeah, I hope that wasn't too rambly about all this stuff. I never knew that I would want gain staging at the end of my signal chain, and these things have made me a believer. So let's go back to the board and let's really just run through some sounds. We're not going to make a lot of dramatic changes to the pedal board. We're just going to kind of dial in a good sound that we like, a nice simple guitar sound, and then we will mess with these, make them match and go kind of unmatched on left to right and see what kind of interesting things we can coax out of the two of these. So thanks for watching. Let's go to the board. Okay, let's start things off by running through our signal chain, although fair warning, we're not going to be using everything on the board today. I am playing a 72 competition Mustang with very low output pickups into the 29 Pedals Una, the Polytune, the Boss VO1 vocoder, the 1981 Inventions DRV, the Cali 76 compact deluxe compressor from Origin Effects, the Benson preamp, the Chase Plus Audio Therme, the Cooper Effects Generation Loss V2, the Hologram Electronics Microcosm, the Strymon Volante, the Big Sky, both 29 pedal WAMPs, whatever the term is. We're going to get it wrong a few more times, I'm sure, into the Walrus Audio ACS1. We are running out of that to a Pinstripe Pedals Disso Plus and into Universal Audio's Luna DAW, not Una, but Luna, where we're running a 1073 preamp. So we are going to be running the Una, the Cali 76, the Benson preamp, the Volante, the Big Sky, and then the Walrus Audio ACS1 for our amp, and that's what this sounds like without the two WAMPs turned on. Now let's listen to those two things and kind of hear how they brighten things up and kind of just add some meaningful body. We've got them set with high input, low output, so that we're kind of really pumping things, but not overdriving the amp necessarily, especially with these low output pickups. And again, we're just going to kind of jump back and forth, kind of disengaging them and re-engaging them from time to time, just because I feel like it's such a subtle thing that you kind of forget that they're there, which is what I love about them. But I think it's important to kind of hear what this sounds like without it. So. Let's leave the level where it is, but let's dial back that presence control and see what that does to kind of like change the overall structure of what we're hearing. So this is presence at max. And presence just shy of minimum. There's like a gentleness to that I really, really find very engaging and beautiful. Especially for finger picking. Finger picking with it cranked back up. And dialed way back down. Okay, let's change those switches around a little bit. Same settings, low presence, but pretty high level output. We're going high input, high output. that doesn't strike me as the kind of thing that you're going to get from putting another boost pedal up front. That's the kind of thing that really feels like I just made my amp bigger. Oh, apologies. This is low input, low out, or low input, high output. Hopefully you can see the writing on the pedal well enough to know that I've been lying to you for the past 2.5 minutes. Okay, let's go to high and high now. We'll keep that presence dialed back, and we'll turn the level down a little bit, and then we'll kind of see how far up we can bring it before we start kind of mangling things. You can already tell how much hotter this is. See, this is where things get a little mangly. We're not actually clipping anything in my DAW, but we are kind of eating up some stuff. If I turn that presence up, I'm willing to bet it gets a little bit worse. Yep. There we go. We've brought the level down a little bit. But we're still getting a little bit more of that grit. Okay, while we have this kind of edgy version of this setup right now, just a little bit more grit. Yeah, I feel like that's a good sweet spot. Let's play with getting a little bit of some kind of stereo width and dynamics out of this. We're going to take the presence up on one channel and the presence down on another. You can definitely hear in the noise from these single coils that the right channel is getting a lot more kind of presence and treble coming out of that difference of the right channel being maxed out and the left channel being minimized. Now that width is a little bit exaggerated by setting it wider than you would probably normally set it. Okay, we're back to kind of comparable levels. So let's go to a bright low input and a high output. Yeah, there's definitely a lot more top end. That's great if you really want like kind of like a trebly finger part to really pop in a mix. Dial back that presence to see if we can kind of round that out a little bit. And now we're gonna go to that high output dark setting. Which is a little bit like being able to have that Jazzmaster jazz circuit at the end of your entire signal chain, which is kind of wonderful. Really dial that presence back to accentuate this and kind of go for really moody. And then let's put the high circuit into that. Let's dial that drive down a little bit. So this is the setting that I was using for those Jaguar parts during the intro song to really get some of that. Just a little bit. I mean, this Mustang's pretty low output. By getting a little bit of extra like grit and bite out of those reverb trails. And once more, let's switch back to not having this on and then bring it back in.